decumulation is simply the antithesis of accumulation. And we spend 30 or 40 years of our lives, hopefully, accumulating retirement funds for our golden years. And that's exactly what we should be doing. And we try to develop a strategy to do that so that at the end of our working career we have a pile of money that we can live on for the rest of our lives. Decumulation is equally as important as accumulation. Of course, you have to have accumulation first in order to need to decumulate. But the important thing about decumulation is if you have a portfolio that involves several different kinds of investments, usually you have, if you're lucky enough, you have a pension from your company. If in the absence of that, you have a 401k hopefully, or an IRA hopefully. And somewhere along the line, depending on when you decide to take it, you have Social Security. But what you need to do when you start decumulating, in other words, when you start deciding how to spend your portfolio of funds, there needs to be some strategy about what you take first and what you save for the future. In the case of people who have IRAs and 401ks, the government demands, at least when you turn age 72, that you take money out of those funds. They call that RMDs, required minimum distribution. And they don't tell you how to do it, they just tell you to do it. So you have to look at your IRA or 401k investments, and you have to decide which of these little piles of money, these little pods of money, should I take out first and which should I delay into the later years. And that's basically what decumulation involves. It's very important to do this properly. You don't want to be taking long-term type investments out prematurely. Some of these things you have to take out on the front end, like pensions or Social Security, that sort of thing. But it's a lot more important thing to do than people realize. Some folks say, well, I've got X amount of money in retirement. When I retire, I'll go ahead and start spending it. Well, that's what it's there for, but you need to spend it correctly. Well, that's something that we're all going to have to deal with, whether we're young or old, because we'll have to deal with it usually when we're young because we have aging parents, and we have to deal with it when we're aging parents simply because we're aging parents. So it's critical that people plan for these eventualities, because they're almost in every case going to happen. One of the most difficult things involved in an aging parent moving in with the kids has to do with money. And it's a very delicate situation to address between kids and their parents, because parents are not inclined to share a lot of details with their kids. That's just the nature of the beast. They just aren't. But if you're an aging parent and you're moving in with kids, let's assume first that you don't have much money. Everybody needs to know that, because they'll know what they've been, the kids. They'll know what they're dealing with when that parent moves in that doesn't have a lot of money. They're going to have to carry most of the financial load, pure and simple. On the other hand, if the parent is quite comfortable financially, then there has to be discussions, or should be discussions, about who pays what and when, because it wouldn't be fair to the kiddos to bear the full load of additional additional expenses when that parent moves in. So it's a conversation that needs to be had. It's a conversation about who pays for what when. Beyond that, the second thing you need to do, perhaps part of the first thing, is you need to find out what the situation is with your parent in terms of their last will and testament and those other agreements that need to be addressed having to do with health issues on the front end. The will needs to be up to date, and everybody needs to know what's in it. And in the case of the parent's unfortunate demise, they need to know who gets what and when. Who gets what and when among siblings. In my opinion, and I think it's more than just my opinion, the reason that I prefer mutual funds versus individual stock is that you're automatically diversified when you buy a mutual fund. There are different degrees of diversification. You can buy an index fund, for example, the S&P 500 index fund, and that gives you a tiny little piece of every stock in the S&P 500. In other words, you get a piece of 500 different companies. A piece of all the good companies, and you also get a piece of the not so good companies. But nevertheless, you're very diversified as opposed to buying individual stocks. Another thing about diversification is with the S&P 500, you are widely diversified. You can also buy sector funds. For example, a Vanguard healthcare fund. You get a wide variety of healthcare related companies, but you're not diversified outside that particular sector. So you need to keep that in mind when you're thinking diversification with funds versus stock. There's diversification and then there's diversification.